let's talk about January. So, hello fellow book nerds, this is Gabby and today we're going to talk about books I read in January, first month of 2024, and we have started strong. I will admit to pre-filming this slightly because the day you're seeing this video, yours truly is moving across London. So and then I'm going to Poland, so there will not be time to film any videos. So I thought, why not pre-film this? I have read 10 books so far, but I have a feeling I might finish one or two more in January. It is the 27th, so that's quite ambitious, but I definitely can finish one more. So we're gonna mention 11 books, and I'm gonna do like a clip with my final thoughts on the book that I'm still in the middle of. And if I read any other books, I'll mention them there. But that's a lot of books, so let's kick this video off. This month was amazing because I managed to read, I think, 2 arcs just before the books came out, have a video for them, so that's really amazing. Overall, there's been amazing new releases, but I also read some backlists. Audiobooks were king for this month. I mean, 6 of those books I read were audiobooks, and so audiobooks are king. But let's talk about the books and what I thought about them. So the first book I picked up in January was The Dawnhounds by Sascha Stronach. So this book is by a Maori author, trans woman, and that was really cool perspective to read from. But the book is a sci-fi novel about this police officer who comes back to life, and she lives in this like corrupted city and is trying to like figure out what her purpose is being brought up. I don't really remember much in terms of plot. I did enjoy the audiobook, but the narrator had a really strong Kiwi accent, which made it like slightly harder for me to understand what was going on. Overall, from what I can remember, the book felt rather jumbled, and it was really hard to understand. There was quite a bit of like jumping around, and I didn't entirely get what was happening and like what the book was meant to do. I thought maybe it was me, I thought maybe it was just an audiobook, but having read other people's reviews, it seems like a common sentiment. While saying that, the book was confusing, but there were some things I really loved, which was the exploration of like police corruption, which was a really strong through line that I really enjoyed through the book. Then also how fiercely queer the book was really amazing. There was a lot of characters who identified with different identities. There was like disabled characters, so I really loved seeing that. The book definitely had its pluses and minuses, but I would not recommend the audiobook. Maybe the ebook or physical would be better and easier to understand, but the audiobook just had me very confused. And I ended up giving the book 3 stars. So that's that. Then we have Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty, another audiobook. And this audiobook was performed amazingly. So in Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi, we follow Amina al-Sirafi, who used to be a pirate. She used to live on the sea and, have lives of adventures and stuff. But I think like 10 years ago or something, she has divorced her, or like she dumped her latest husband and settled down in her hometown because she fell pregnant and she wants to take care of her daughter. But then something happens and her old life like beckons her back in, and the audiobook was done brilliantly. It just had so much energy. It's kind of made to be like a testimony, like in the hindsight of people telling these stories, and it felt almost like a podcast because it was like Amina had their own narrator, but a scholar who is recording all of this had their own narrator, and it was just like so dynamic, so well performed. I loved it. It just felt like an adventure at the sea. I absolutely adored like being with these people and having the pirate life and experiencing everything that was happening. I just thought it was like so well executed, and it just felt like adventure, like just so brilliant. The world was super interesting. Amina is Muslim, which was really cool. She's also like 40 and she's got a kid, and I just thought it was so cool to see a main character who's like different than your 17-year-old. It was just like felt very different, and I really loved that. I love that the author explored that, and Amina was like no less badass and cool, but you could feel like she's lived and she's had experiences, and she like her bones ache and all that kind of stuff. I just absolutely loved that. And yeah, the world was so interesting. Had jinns and magic and artifacts, and I'm just realizing that pirate books are something I really like, or I have the potential to like. This felt like watching One Piece. I've never seen the actual anime, but I've watched the Netflix show and I loved it so much, and just the sense of adventure and freedom you have at sea. This book made me feel that way. It was just done incredibly well. I loved it. Like, really amazing secondary characters as well, which was really great to see. Everyone had such clear, distinct voice, and there was like queer characters, disabled characters. Like, I really loved it. Super diverse read. A great time. I ended up giving it 5 stars, so you know, it was good. Then I picked up Voyage of the Damned by Frances White. So this book, it's an arc I got at an event I went to, and I have a full review for this book. It's non-spoilery if you want to have a look at that. But in this book, we follow a world where there's like 12 provinces, and each of them has their own like protector animal, and each of them also has a special gift, and that means they're called the Blessed. So each province has this one like blessed person who is part of the royalty and represents their province. And now that all the provinces had their blessed unveiled, they are going on this cruise. And first day of the cruise, someone dies, and it's a murder mystery. It's gay, and I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was done so well. Again, I have really detailed thoughts, but the writing was amazing. The tone of voice was really distinct and powerful, and it was just like a quirky, fun novel with quite adult and deep ponderings that I was surprised by how deep the book went and how thoughtful it was. And I feel like it's just such a bubblegum package, but you get like a lot of substance inside. So I really enjoyed that. I gave the book 5 stars as well. I had some small gripes, but I explained that in the spoiler section of the review. But yeah, I would totally recommend this if you love adventure. Again, it's set at sea, but it's not about pirates, and it's less an adventure, it's like a murder mystery, but with really diverse, amazing, distinct characters, and it just felt like a warm hug, and also like a surprisingly deep conversation like at night, you know. I love this book. I had a great time with it, and I would totally recommend it. It's a brand new release, so yeah, go check it out. Okay, then we have another book I really enjoyed, which was The Center by Ayesha Manazir Siddiqi. So in this book, we follow a Pakistani woman living in the UK who works as a translator, but she learns about this thing called The Center from her boyfriend, who's gone there to learn languages, and you learn a language in like 10 days. It's like incredibly short time to become basically fluent in a new language, and she feels like this is something that would really support her career. She'd be able to translate into more languages and have a better grasp on the meanings and stuff. But this center thing is very hush hush. No one can know. You can only tell one person in your life about this place, and then they can join by referral only. It's like a classic, you know, weird things happening. Ooh. But I really, really enjoyed it. It was so interesting. I feel like a lot of books about like these like weird society culty thingies are like focused on I've just never had one focused on translation and language and power of language. I feel like if you enjoy Babel by Huang, you might enjoy this one as well. I love the exploration of like language and meaning of language and words and nuances between different languages and how you express yourself within them. And I feel like the like twist was the least interesting part of this book, because like everything else was just so interesting, and you have really cool, distinct characters as well, which I really enjoyed. Like our main character, I would not call her likable by any means. She actually got on my nerves quite a bit, but she's very realistic. And I think reading this from her perspective leaves you thinking a little bit like, can you trust her 100%? Is she a reliable narrator? I feel like there was overall this aura of ambiguity that I really enjoyed. So I give this book 4.5, and I would highly recommend if anything I said just now sounds interesting. I read Godkiller by Hannah Kanner. So this book is essentially like a Witcher retelling, and it doesn't really mention that anywhere, and that was one part that bothered me. So in this book we follow this woman who when she was young, her family got killed for the gods as a sacrifice, and since then she's worked to kill the gods, and she's what's known a god killer. And many years ago there was a war where actually they killed all the gods, but the gods like keep reappearing and stuff, and the gods are outlawed now, so no one can worship, and the god killers become like mercenaries like for the king. So this is basically her monsters, like she is the Witcher, but she's a god killer. Then we have a young girl who has got a secret of her own. So she actually has a god that's like bonded to her, and she doesn't know how that works, and she can't get rid of him. And one day her family gets killed, so she has to run away, and she bumps into the god killer, and the two of them try to go on this journey to find out how to remove the little girl's god. And then we have like another character who is he used to be a soldier, and he's best friends with the king, and now the king needs his help, so he also goes on a journey. And like, I really enjoyed it. I thought the book was really dark and brutal, but the gods were so fascinating. Like, being the god killer was really awesome and cool. And like, overall, I had a really good time with it. The relationships were strong. I definitely will pick up the sequel. But yeah, my only thing was, I was like, this is The Witcher. Like, I'm not saying this is the exact same story, but like it's the same setup as The Witcher. So like say it was inspired by it. Like otherwise it feels really dishonest, and it feels like more. I believe that, everyone's got ideas, and the ideas, it depends on how you execute them, and you can have the same idea, and that's fine. When it's something so prevalent in culture and the book that's just so obviously inspired by it, it doesn't have to be like, oh, I took everything, whatever. It's just like acknowledge that this other thing exists. I think because I'm Polish and The Witcher is a Polish book series, I just feel like, like put some respect on The Witcher's name. Like, you were inspired, that's fine. So yeah, I enjoyed this. It wasn't like perfect, but I still had a really good time, and I think it was written well, and the story and the world was fascinating. So I gave it 4 stars, and I will pick up the sequel. Then let's briefly mention the 2 new releases I read. So I've read Faebound by Saara El-Arifi. So Faebound is by the author of Final Strife, which I really loved, and this book is a fantasy about a world where there were 3 gods, and each of the gods created a creature. So they created elves, fae, and humans. Fae and humans long ago fought a war and disappeared, believed to be extinct, both of them, and elves have been running the world, but they're also fighting in this forever war where each of their tribes fight each other for resources. And the 2 main characters are 2 sisters who are elves. One of them is a soldier, and one of them is a seer. Circumstances, one of them gets exiled, and they both have to go on this journey, and they found out the fae are maybe not quite as extinct as everyone believed. I have a full review where I talk about all of this. It's non-spoilery if you want to have a look. I will say I really enjoyed the world and the setup and the world building. Fascinating. I enjoyed the main characters, but I feel like the book was way too rushed, slightly underdeveloped, ultimately leaving me feeling rather meh about the whole affair, because I feel like it just needed a little bit more, and I needed to believe in the relationships, and I need to believe the characters, whereas they did a lot of telling me, not really showing me. So for that reason, I ended up giving it 3.5. I would still say that I enjoyed it, and I will definitely pick up the sequel, but it just didn't quite live up to my expectations. And then I'm just gonna mention this book because I've actually not, I just filmed my review, but I've not posted my review. And that's An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. So this is a newest release by the author of A Dowry in Blood, dark academia set in 1960s, where we follow two girls who go to this illustrious university that's all girls in Mississippi. And they join this poetry club. And there's this teacher called De La Fontaine, and maybe something untoward is happening, and there's vampires. I'm not gonna tell you what I thought about this because I want you to read my review. So subscribe because my review is coming next week. I have thoughts and they were surprising. So yeah, I'm not gonna tell you the rating. I'm not gonna tell you what I thought about it, but I've read this book. Then let's just mention the two romances I've read. So first being Winter Gods and Serpents by Wendy Heiss. So this book is self-published. I heard about this on TikTok. I just kept getting the TikToks from the author recommended to me, and it just sounded really intriguing. So in this book we follow a girl who's like a princess, but she's been in exile for years. When she was younger, her whole family got killed, and she's been hating her father ever since because he's alive and he's the king, and yeah, she's been living in exile. But then her father calls her back to the kingdom and says that she has to marry the king of the kingdom that killed her family. So essentially the main character is what's called like a hybrid. She's like daughter of two powerful like mages, let's call it, because otherwise too much to get into, like mages, two different types of magic. So everyone expected her and her siblings to be like these uncontrollable, super powerful monsters, but she never really exhibited any powers. But that kingdom that attacked them thought, you know, they had this potential to be like destruction of the world. She is waiting to be married to this guy, and then from that kingdom's two guys get sent as her bodyguards. And like this book is so weird because there's a lot of things I really liked, but there's like so many things I didn't. So basically, I actually wrote this review, but it's on my phone and I'm filming on my phone, so I need to post that review. But essentially, things I enjoyed. I enjoyed the relationship. The two main characters, they had so much chemistry. The female main character is essentially Rysand from A Court of Thorns and Roses, if he was a girl, which was really refreshing because you don't usually get like female characters able to be like ruthless and cruel and all of that and not made to feel like really, really badly about it. So I enjoyed her. I liked him. He was like this soothing presence. So I liked them together. They had so much chemistry, and I feel like their scenes together were done so well. I would actually classify them as a slow burn, which I don't say often, because to me, if you get together in book one, you're not slow burn. But the thing is, this book is 800 pages long, which I didn't know when I started the book. So I felt like I was reading and reading and reading, and it's just like I was like 20% in. I was like, how? I've been reading for ages. And I realized 800 pages long. So although the characters get together kind of in a not together, but like they realize their feelings in book one, that still was like 600-700 pages. So you know, like it was pretty slow. And yeah, I just think this book needed another round of edits. So it needed edits for line editing, like the typos. There were several times where there something was said and I'm like, that word doesn't mean what you think, hon, or that saying is not how it goes. Like it's just common things that you might mishear and think that's what it is, but like that's not actually the proverb or whatever. Like there was a lot of things like that. It wasn't so much typos, like it was more like things like that, just like wrong word was used and stuff like that, which was like not the end of the world, but obviously I know it's self-published, so there's only so much that person can do, but I just feel like it could have been way more polished. And then it just needed like a developmental edit, because the magic system, I got into my head. I could not explain this in any kind of cohesive way. Somehow we got info dumps while also not understanding anything. There was 15,000 different magic systems, and they're all like separate but kind of can meet, and every kingdom has a completely different magic system, and I just didn't understand anything in terms of like how the world worked, what sets of powers people had, what being one thing or the other meant. It just felt like really, really confusing, and I didn't understand anything. I wasn't reading this book for the magic and the world, if I'm being honest. I read it for the relationship, and for that reason I will pick up the sequel. But yeah, I don't understand this world and I don't know what's happening. And there were also like inconsistencies in the characters. Like the main character, for example, first half of the book, we just keep hearing how she doesn't eat. She doesn't eat, she doesn't eat, never ate. Like she can go days without eating, just doesn't eat, doesn't eat. And then there's scenes upon scenes upon scenes, like 15 scenes in the second half where she just stuffs her face. Why did she only like suddenly start eating? And also, I could have been taught, like I could have gotten the same message without being told 15 times that she stuffed her face so fast that she choked and the guy had to pat her on the back, and then she just kept eating very fast, and she eats very, very fast, and she eats all the... I was like, okay, calm down. Like, I understand kind of what you're trying to tell me, but like, this could have been achieved having this scene twice. I did not need to sit through so many scenes of her eating. And then this happened like several times where I feel like how the characters felt in the beginning of the book was very different than what they felt in the end of the book. And to me, it's just because probably it was written, and I don't know if no one read the book all the way through, or the people that did were too familiar with the story, but I just need this fresh eyes to be like, hey, I don't understand, why is there so much inconsistency? So if you're like a really big fan of fantasy romance, I would say like give it a shot, like whatever. If you don't care, there you go. If you just vaguely like it and maybe you want to pick it up for the fantasy world, I wouldn't, because I feel like you're going to be very disappointed. But yeah, I feel like there was so much, like I could have had a red marker and be like, just take out all of these sentences, and then the book will not be 800 pages long, and it will make more sense and be less repetitive. So that was really like harsh. I feel the book was, I still really enjoyed it, like paradoxically I still had a good time. I ended up giving it 3 stars because the enjoyment was really high, but the consistency and cohesion of the world I don't feel like was there. And then I picked up another book that is a mess, which is Stephenie Meyer's New Moon. So I'm doing a reread with a friend and we're on book 2. I picked up the audiobook because I was like, I'm never gonna read this book physically, like let's just get through it. And I will say the first third is so miserable. If you don't know what New Moon is about, it's a sequel to Twilight. We follow a girl called Bella as she falls in love with this vampire called Edward. And like the first third of this book is so miserable. This girl's so embarrassing. Like it was actually embarrassing. I was like, I appreciate you're sad over a boy, but if I did all that, I'd be so embarrassed. Like, don't let people know how sad you are. It's just sad. And yeah, I hated the first third. Then Jacob comes in. He's like a ray of sunshine, but then we lose him so quickly. It's like, it just hurts, because I've always really, really liked Jacob pre-transition. I just think pre-transition Jacob was just like so precious and so kind and so funny and thoughtful, and then he just turns into this brooding, annoying, freaking monster, and I just hate him. So I was done by the time he turned. I was like, I don't want to read this anymore. And then, you know what, the ending sucked me in. I will say, I couldn't put the audiobook down. I was like, oh my god, what happens next? Although I know. So I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm ready for Eclipse, but I might pick up the audiobook. It's just much easier than reading this with your eyes and being like... But yeah, Edward's still incredibly condescending, and they just steamroll over this poor girl. Like, oh my goodness, like this poor girl is just always like being told what to think and what to do, and it's just like, okay. So yeah, I gave Twilight 2.5 stars. Let's just talk about the only nonfiction I read this month, which was called In Defense of Witches, Why Women Are Still on Trial by Mona Chollet. So this book was actually originally written in French, and I read the translation. The book is essentially talking about like witch trials and the archetype of a witch, and how each, like different parts of witches correspond with misogyny. So it was about reproductive rights, it was about aging, and freedom of women and liberation of women. And I thought there was like some really interesting points made. but I wasn't like super overtly impressed because I feel like although the book came out in 2022, a lot of the references felt really older. Especially the first half, they kept saying stats from like early 2000s, early 2010s, and I'm like, the world moves so fast. I feel like if you're gonna write a nonfiction book, you should like strive to have as updated stats as you can, because especially when it comes to feel like queer acceptance and women's rights and stuff like that, like things change quickly. So that was my one complaint, and overall I didn't feel like it told me anything I didn't know before, although I did find a section on like aging really fascinating, and I feel like that I've heard before watching like YouTube commentaries and stuff like that, but not so much in nonfiction. Usually it focuses on different stuff. So I really enjoyed that, and overall, like, it was pretty good. I just feel like I've read a fair share of like feminist fiction now, or sorry, feminist nonfiction, or like at least nothing too involved, but like the intro to feminist fiction, that they all kind of tell me the same thing. So maybe I need to like dig a little deeper. But yeah, it was pretty good. I gave it 3.5. I feel like it's worth it if you find the topic interesting. But it's not my favorite book I've read about the topic, which I think is still Invisible Woman, because it just had so many stats and facts and really rocked my perspective on like how fucked the world is. So yeah, that was a good book. So that's the 10 books I did read in January. And now for a book that I've started, I've not read yet, but I think I'll finish by the time January comes around. It's called The Water Outlaws by S.L. Huang. So in this book, we follow Lin Chong, who is a master arms instructor in this like fantasy China-inspired world. You know, she always had to scrape and fight real hard for everything she's got because she's a woman in a men's world. One day she gets falsely accused by a guy of treason, and she gets sent to prison, and then on her way to prison they try to murder her, so she gets rescued by a band of bandits, and she becomes a bandit, and it's an all-female, or like mostly all-female group of bandits. I think the book said that it was a retelling, like gender-bent retelling. I don't know what retelling of what, but apparently it is. And it's wuxia. So wuxia is martial arts literature. So it definitely feels like it. It's very epic. It's very like fighting and like stances and like taking it, like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. It feels very grand. Like I have read another wuxia novel that was like translator from Chinese, and I think it's very similar to that, and it feels very epic, and it's about honor, and I find it fascinating because the main characters, when you start the book, she almost feels like the type of person that would vote for like Trump, or maybe not vote for Trump, but like not necessarily fight it either. You know, she's worked really hard for where she's got, and she begins the book thinking, you know, there's a system, you just have to work within its rules, and then you're gonna get rewarded. And you know, if other women can't do that, it's probably their own fault because they're not working hard enough, and attitudes like that, but get thankfully like bullied out of her eventually. So it was an interesting perspective to follow. Overall, I'm halfway through. I am like enjoying it, although not loving it. I'm not sure why I'm not loving it. I'm just like feel slightly removed from the characters, which I feel like comes naturally when it's like such an epic story that's more like about these archetypes and people and worlds versus like actual humans. But it's definitely a fascinating world. I really enjoy having the all-female cast, and there's like people that are gender fluid, and it's just like their experience in this antiquated society is very interesting, and I'm enjoying it. So I'll let you know what my final rating is, because I'm very confused. Like, I'm halfway through and I feel very meh about it, so I feel like it might be a 3. Okay, in a shocking twist of fate, I actually read 3 more books. So I finished The Water Outlaws. I felt about it pretty much the same as when I told you. It was just okay. I gave it 3 stars. In the end, I just didn't feel very connected to any of the characters. They honestly could have been interchangeable in my mind. I think if you really enjoy action and the type of story it is, which is like epic and heroes and villains and honor, then maybe you'll enjoy it. But it just wasn't for me. I didn't particularly vibe with it. Then the next book I read, which was a total surprise to me how quickly I read it. I just needed to pick up a long audiobook to make sure I don't finish it, and then I finished it in like 2 days. That book is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. So this is a book I've been seeing on TikTok tons, and it says for fans of romantasy. So I was like, all right, let me check it out. I'm just curious. Let me check it out. So this book is fantasy? Question mark. It's a romantasy. It's a romantic fantasy or romance fantasy. But to me, it sometimes felt like a little bit of a sci-fi. We follow a world where there was this massive disease, and people who survived as a disease, they gained superpowers essentially. And then many years later, they blamed the people that didn't have superpowers on this virus that was going around and hunted them to like basic extinction. So it's illegal not to have powers in this city, and our main character is a street urchin, I guess, who has a dark secret that she doesn't want coming out. But through a twist of fate and also her own meddling, she ends up getting involved with the prince, who is it's called like enforcer or something. So he's basically gonna be like the torturer and like the right hand of the future king, his brother, because he's the younger brother. And she runs into him, and shenanigans. They end up both competing in this trial. And this trial is meant to like find the strongest magic user and the best person, whatever. I wouldn't really call it an enemies to lovers, but like coming from two different worlds and factions to lovers, kind of. She's also kind of his brother is also kind of like competing for her affection. So if you're a fan of Summer After I Turned Pretty, I think so, you might enjoy that one because it's two brothers and one girl, and you know how that goes. I will say I loved the main couple. They had such good banter. I didn't know the whole time, was this book YA, was it adult? I think it's a YA book, but like the first one, I guess it could either way, because they just had so much sexual tension and so much banter and just sexiness in that pairing. I loved it. So that almost made me feel like that was an adult book. But then like the world building and everything else about it did feel very YA. The world was just a bit cringy and a little bit cliche. I'm gonna call it that. Like just the names for the fantastical things felt like so cringy. For example, someone who has brute strength is called like a brawler or something, or brawn or something, like from the word brawn. I think a mundane is not like a normal person, but like a weak powered person. And ordinary or something like that is an ordinary person. It's just this feels a little like the type of labels that they would use in like Divergent. But you know, whatever, I don't really care about that part of the book anyway. The magic system was a little bit confusing and weirdly explained. Like I don't entirely like I understand the basics, but like there's like so many different types and all that. So that I was like, okay. And then I was like, is this a sci-fi? Is this meant to be futuristic? Is this meant to be like a normal like an ordinary fantasy world we're used to? Like what is happening? Because they would dress sometimes modern, sometimes like in a medieval fantasy. The buildings felt like they come from medieval fantasy, but then they had TVs, but then they had like, it was very confusing. Orienting myself in the world, I was like, I don't know what you're doing. But because the couple was so enjoyable, I ended up giving it 3.5 stars because I just really enjoyed it. And I thought it was fun, and I'm gonna continue with the series. So yeah, I would recommend if you're a fan of some good old fantasy romance. And then because I spent my whole day cleaning every piece of my house, this is my new house, by the way, much noisier because you can hear everything from the street, so I really hope that doesn't come through. But I had to clean every bit of my old house to be like, okay, here, take it. I've listened to an entire audiobook, not a short audiobook either, 12-hour audiobook in one day. And that audiobook was 20 Years Later by Charlie Donlea. So this book is a thriller or like a mystery novel that I've heard of before it came out. I think it was either on my most anticipated of the month list, or I just did the research and remember reading the synopsis. But essentially, this is set in 2021, and there's this new technology that came in that allows scientists to do DNA research to find the victim, or like find victims of 9/11, like from bone fragments. Like they extract DNA and can match it to existing records. They find a hit, and they find this woman who was accused of murder 20 years ago, before the Twin Towers fell. You know, that the case got abandoned because they were like, okay, well, she's likely died, and like all that kind of thing. But then there's a reporter from Los Angeles who has this, like, I imagined it to be kind of like a, not like Good Morning America, but you know, like one of those like shows where they go and find ghosts and the most amazing stories, and it's like, I don't know, I don't watch that kind of TV, but from that kind of show, she's like a presenter and she's interested in the story, and then she has like something dark in her past and things are like in flux. And we also follow an ex-police officer, or like ex-FBI agent, who used to be involved in the case of that woman murdering someone from 9/11. It's a little complicated. There were like three, I would say, like plot points, like plots going together. But I actually found it rather enjoyable. I think that the book was pretty strong. I had my attention. I feel like there was a really nice, cute relationship. The characters were pretty well developed. I liked learning about all the new technology, although sometimes it almost felt like someone wanted to like teach us more about 9/11 and DNA technology specifically. And they were like, there's this really cool breakthrough that I need to teach people, but if I write a non-fiction novel, they will not care. So I'm gonna write a fiction novel so people learn. Like, it felt like that because it felt like a product placement. The way they would just go on these tangents explaining the DNA sequencing and 9/11 and how that worked. I was like, is this a documentary on 9/11? Like I get that it's for the show, which would be like a documentary of it. But she wasn't even recording the show. She's just interviewing people pre-show. So I found it funny. I was like, okay, someone really wants me to know about this new DNA sequencing. But whatever. I had a decent time with it. I ended up giving it 3.5 according to Copile. In my feelings, it's more of a 3. So on Goodreads, I'm going to give it a 3. But I guess it's a 3.5. So those are actually all the books I read in January. This video will come out later than planned because today's the first day I had time to like wash my hair. And I still don't have time to finish editing everything. But today was the first day. I was like, yes, okay. So hopefully you'll see this video soon. And in the end, that means I read 13 books. Alright, well, those are all the books I picked up in January. Have you read any of them? What did you think? What was your favorite book you read this month? I think mine probably would be Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi. It was just such a fun book. I had honestly like, oh, it was amazing. It was like so much fun. So yeah, I really enjoyed that one, and I'm very much looking forward to the sequel when it does come out. But yeah, I feel like a good month reading, even if I didn't love everything I read I had opinions on, which is good rather than feeling like super mediocre about something. But yeah, starting the year strong. Somehow January always ends up being one of my best, if not the best month. But I think that's because January like crawls, so I feel like I have a lot of time to read because there's like, January is just so long. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know what your favorite book was that you read in January. Let me know if you read any of the books I talked about. And if you enjoyed the video, if you could comment, like, and subscribe, I really, really appreciate it. It really helps me out. But that's it from me, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!